What is going on YouTube? Run and Gun Sports back here with another video. Today is our NFL Weekly News Update. We have a ton of NFL news to get you caught up on, and March Madness is happening right now. If you haven't heard, been a few upsets actually. Virginia was upset by Ohio the other day, just last night. No perfect brackets, 15 million brackets filled out in the first round of the tournament. 0 perfect brackets remain. Texas was upset by Abilene Christian, and Purdue was upset by North Texas. Obviously, Loyola Chicago upset Illinois just this morning to make a Sweet 16 appearance. Another Cinderella run for that team again. Crazy. And Oregon State was defeated by Tennessee was defeated by Oregon State. So the madness is happening right now in March Madness, and a great time for college basketball. But we're here to talk about the the NFL Weekly News Update. And so let's get right into the video. If you have not, please leave a like down below, like, subscribe, share this to your friends who love football. So the Los Angeles Chargers land former Packers center Corey Linsley on a 5-year, $62.5 million deal with $17 million guaranteed. And I think this is honestly a really good move. I think that the Chargers, with young quarterback Justin Herbert and the rookie of the year in the NFL last year, and I think Justin Jefferson was snubbed in my opinion, but Justin Herbert did have a great year. I won't deny that, but they need the protection for Justin Herbert, and I've said this a few times. I think the Chargers have one of the more underrated rosters in the NFL, and with adding more protection for a young quarterback, it's going to be a good move for that team. I think they'll do very well. They're just in a very competitive division with the Chiefs obviously making the Super Bowl 2 years in a row, and the Raiders making the Super Bowl, and the Raiders being just short of the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of the Raiders, the Patriots sign wide receiver Nelson Agholor. He's very excited to join the Patriots. Some Patriots have been making a ton of moves this year, and so we'll see what Nelson Agholor can bring to that Patriots team. Is a little old now, but experience for those young receivers that they do have, like N'Keal Harry, and it'll be great to see. Jaguars and Carlos Hyde agreed to terms on a 2-year, $6 million deal. And for the Seahawks, that loss is quite big, but they do have a steady stable of running backs back there. They did re-sign Alex Collins, who I hope they'll give more playing time to this year. And if losing Carlos Hyde, they re-sign Chris Carson. So we'll see what happens with that backfield next year. The Seahawks do have a second-round pick. I think that if Trey Sermon or any top 3 running back in the draft is still around, I think that they should really consider going for any of those guys, Michael Carter or Trey Sermon. And we'll see who the starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks is next year. But the Jaguars picking up Carlos Hyde, a very good move. They did have James Washington last year, who had a very good rookie season, but adding that experience will just help them even more. The Chiefs signed Patriots offensive lineman Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney does, quote, not know what position he'll play next year. Obviously, the Chiefs have let a few of their star offensive linemen go, and that's kind of hurt them quite a bit with Mahomes, such a big contract, and that leaves less money for the offensive linemen, the guys protecting Mahomes, and Mahomes can't do it without protection. So, but they signed Joe Thuney, a great move in my opinion for them, and I think that's a great signing for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Tennessee Titans signed linebacker Bud Dupree and extend current linebacker Jayon Brown. I think this is a very good move. Bud Dupree is very talented, very underappreciated in my opinion for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, and I think that he'll have a very, very good year with the Tennessee Titans, and Jayon Brown's play will be boosted to the next level with some support when that defense was just terrible last year. The Jets signed Corey Davis. He was drafted 5th overall in the 2017 draft. We talked about the Jets in our last video. If you have not seen the Jets off-season review, please go check that out after this video. Um, we talked about how good of a signing this is, in my opinion. I think it's going to be great for whoever the quarterback is next year, whether they draft a new guy or if Sam Darnold stays around. And 2020, he played 14 games. He started 12 of them, 65 receptions, 984 yards, and 15 yards per catch. So just a great move and more weapons for whoever the quarterback will be for the New York Jets next year. The Patriots signed two tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Good move there. We saw when the Patriots were in their prime, they had a lot of two tight end sets, and the last time they had a good tight end obviously was Rob Gronkowski, and I think that's a very good move for the Patriots to go back to what was working for him. Bill Belichick had all the money in the world this year. We talked about all the moves he's been making, and I think that this really helps him out a ton, and we'll see how if moving back to the old system. The Saints re-signed quarterback Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. They have the 28th overall pick in the NFL draft this year. There's talks of the Saints trading up to draft the quarterback in the draft this year in the first round from 28. And from 2016 to 2018, 8 teams have traded up to draft a QB in the early first round. Those players were Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Rosen, Mitchell Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, and Carson Wentz. And so right there, it's pretty hit or miss. Some of those guys did well in the league. Some of those guys were bust. Some of those, actually, most of those guys are kind of just hanging around the league right now. Mitch Trubisky was signed by the Bills. We'll talk about that later. But some of them are very, very good players. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. And so, it's a risk to trade up because you lose something, whether it's a draft pick or a player, to get up. But if they were to trade up, I'm hearing that Mac Jones from Alabama would be the selection. I think it'd be a very good fit. Him and Drew Brees have very similar play styles, and I think that if they do draft Mac Jones, he'll do very good with that system. Rob Gronkowski signs a deal for 1 year, $8 million with up to $2 million in incentives. So the Buccaneers, I think, have a very good shot to repeat their Super Bowl victory. And with Rob Gronkowski staying around, I think it will be helpful for Tom Brady. Ryan Fitzpatrick signs with his 9th team in the NFL, the Washington football team. The Bengals signed Trey Hendrickson to a 4-year, $60 million deal, earning $32 million in his first 2 years. Cincinnati last year ranked dead last in sacks in the league, so good pickup for them. Trey Hendrickson, very young and very underrated in my opinion. He's a very good player and a great pickup for that team. The Patriots add wide receiver Kendrick Bourne to their roster. We're talking about all the weapons they picked up, 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So I think that's a very good move for them to pick up Kendrick Bourne as well. Rams agree to deal with Leonard Floyd for a 4-year deal, and I think this is a very good move as well for the Rams. We saw the Rams probably, in my opinion, the best defense last year, and bringing those players back when Aaron Donald was double teamed, Leonard Floyd and Samson Mbuka and tons of other guys would step up, and when Aaron Donald's just so dominant, all they can do is double team to try and stop him. They won't stop him, but it leaves opportunities for the other players to get better, and that's why Aaron Donald is so good. And you could make an argument that he is the best player in the NFL, and honestly, I could agree with it. Just his dominance, and he's so strong. There's videos of him tossing Ezekiel Elliott out the way in games, and it's just ridiculously how strong and fast he is for his size. Jalen Mills signed a 4-year $24 million deal with the Patriots. Talked about it again. The Patriots out there spending money. The stimulus check hit early for them, I guess, but they are out there trying to rebuild this team. They do not like having mediocre years, and I can't imagine Bill Belichick does. All he knows is making the playoffs and making Super Bowl. So a good move there, in my opinion. Stephon Gilmore is in question on whether he'll be returning back to the Patriots or not. And I think with or without Stephon Gilmore and all these adds to this team, the Patriots have a legit shot to make the playoffs. And I think the AFC East next year has a really, really, really good shot to have 3 teams crack the playoffs with the Bills, Dolphins, and Patriots. All those teams are just so good right now, or they're either the Patriots didn't have a very good year last year, but they have all the money to go out and spend money to get more players. And the Dolphins last year barely missed the playoffs, and they have 4 of the top 50 picks in the draft. So very good future for all 3 of those teams. And the Bills, obviously short of the Super Bowl last year after losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, but I can't imagine that they won't be back in the playoffs and make a deep run again next year. Shaq Griffin signs deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and for the Seahawks, he's a very valuable player to the team, but I don't. He has times where he's just so inconsistent and gives up some dumb plays, and I think it's a loss that we can deal with. It frees up some cap space, and the Jaguars, that's a very good move for them. A young corner, Shaquille Griffin, do very well, I think, with that team. They were terrible at the defensive backfield last year, and this is a very good pickup for them. The Chargers re-signed kicker Michael Badgley. The Raiders are expected to release veteran center Rodney Hudson. The Giants bring in cornerback Adori Jackson after being released by the Tennessee Titans. The Eagles are also showing interest, and Adori Jackson's one of those guys that coming out of college, very hyped. I don't think, maybe a little overhyped. Coming out of USC, he was very hyped. Had very high standards for when he made it to the league, and really hasn't panned out as well. We saw versus the Packers in the Sunday night game, he was exposed a few times, just looked out of position out there. But I think that if a new team picks him up and gives him another chance, it will be his last shot in the NFL. I think if he figures it out and gets better, I think he has a shot to be good in the league, but his time is running out as the Titans just released him, and to get released by the Titans and their defense was not very good last year. It's not a good sign for Adoree Jackson's future in the NFL. The Russell Wilson trade talks to Chicago are over after the Bears signed Andy Dalton, and Andy Dalton was told that the QB1 spot, starting quarterback position, is his, and Bears fans look away now. It's just not looking good for this team. Last year we saw they were actually made the playoffs, but with not a very good record, because they got off to a very good start but lost many games after that. And the Mitch Trubisky, the quarterback play, was like one of the biggest problems for them. And Khalil Mack is declining. No one realizes it, but he truly is declining. And I think that with Andy Dalton coming in, I don't see it helping at all. We saw what he did with the Cowboys, not much really. And I think that it's just a bad time to be a Bears fan. There was the Sunday night game they played versus the Green Bay Packers, and the Bears team, just watching that Bears team, it just looks like no one's having fun. Matt Nagy's just not a very good coach, and it's just unfortunate that they signed Andy Dalton when their hopes were up to get Russell Wilson, because Andy Dalton and Russell Wilson aren't even on the same scale of talent right now. Andy Dalton used to be very good, but very old now, and unfortunate for the Bears fans. Dolphins signed Colts former backup quarterback Jacoby Brassette, and kind of interesting move, but with Ryan Fitzpatrick obviously leaving to the Washington football team, honestly isn't too bad of a move. They do need a backup, obviously, for Tua Tagovailoa. They did have Josh Rosen for a while before he was sent over to the 49ers, where he did appear on the sideline for the game versus the Cardinals, which they did defeat the Cardinals in a upset victory later in the season. The Texans signed Tyrod Taylor to a one-year deal, and Tyrod Taylor last year, maybe one of the more unfortunate years in the NFL. He was the starter for the first game and then was injured by a member of the Chargers training staff, punctured a lung, I believe, right before warm-up. Then Justin Herbert comes in and goes out and wins Rookie of the Year. So Tyrod Taylor did not see a spot after that injury. So the Texans, if that is the move for them at quarterback, then that is just horrible news for them, and it's nowhere but down for the Texans, really. I don't think anyone would be shocked if the Texans are picking first overall in the NFL draft in the 2022 NFL draft
because they just don't have the money for anything, and their talent's not there, and Deshaun Watson doesn't want to be there, and he may not even play this season if he is not traded. So we'll see what happens. Tampa Bay brings back Shaq Barrett for a 4-year, $72 million deal, and I think it's a great move. The Buccaneers really trying to repeat, and it shows. They want to bring all these guys back, which is going to be tough with salary cap, and that's a great move to get them started. I think that they seriously have a great shot to repeat if they do. I think it could be the Bucs versus Chiefs in the Super Bowl again next year, and I wouldn't be shocked if it goes either way. The Chiefs may want the revenge more, but the Bills signed former Saints wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders. The Buffalo Bills said, quote, a steal of a signing, and I agree with that. That's scary to think that Josh Allen will have Emmanuel Sanders on his team next year, as well as Stephon Diggs. The Lions sign unrestricted free agent and former Packers running back Jamal Williams. Patriots signed tackle Trent Brown from Las Vegas. Right now, it's not looking good for the Las Vegas Raiders. They're losing a lot of their players especially their offensive line and receivers, to teams. And John Gruden, in my opinion, has been the worst coaching hire there's been in a while. And he was so overhyped coming back out of retirement, and he's done nothing since. People thought that they'd make the playoffs every year, and he hasn't even made the playoffs with them. And I just don't think that he's the answer for the Raiders, and I don't know how long he'll be around for. Granted, it's hard to fire a guy like John Gruden. I just don't think he's the answer, and I think that they should fire him, but who knows if they will or not. Green is going to the Arizona Cardinals. It is considered one of the worst free agent signings so far, according to Sports Illustrated, and per 24/7 Sports, they say AJ Green, quote, wants to pull another Tom Brady, which in my interpretation, means that he wants to try and win a Super Bowl and probably retire after that. But I don't see that happening with the Cardinals team. I mean, yes, they have a good team, but I honestly don't see it as being that bad of a move, other than the fact that it is kind of a waste of money. They don't need a receiver too terribly bad, but it's not the worst move at the same time. They do have a lot of young receivers, and he could be sort of a mentor for him. And DeAndre Hopkins, obviously one of the best receivers in the league last year, but I don't think it's as bad as people are saying. It's not the greatest move, but it's not a terrible move at the same time. The Raiders re-sign guard Richie Incognito after releasing him earlier this offseason. The Raiders, like I just said, they're in a bad situation, and it's not looking good for them at all. Rodney Hudson, we talked about him, he was released earlier by the Raiders, signed by the Arizona Cardinals after being released, obviously. And I just think that the Raiders, I don't know what their front office is doing right now. Are they going to go out and get someone big? I don't necessarily think that they're too bad in cap space, and I don't think they're in the negative, but they're letting all these guys go, and they're valuable players too. And so something tells me that something else is going on there. They might be trying to grab some big name guy out there, maybe Deshaun Watson, who knows, because that's the only person I can think of right now that would cost releasing this many players. Buffalo Bills agree to terms to re-sign safety Levi Wallace. The Seattle Seahawks signed tight end from Rams Gerald Everett. In 2020, he had 41 receptions, 417 yards, and 1 touchdown. This is an interesting move, in my opinion. I think that, though it's not the greatest move, the Seattle Seahawks front office has just not been very good these last few years. And I think that the only thing that gives me hope about this move for the Seahawks is that Gerald Everett was with Shane Waldron, the Seahawks offensive coordinator now. Shane Waldron was the Rams passing game coordinator, and I never agreed with that move, Shane Waldron becoming the Seahawks offensive coordinator. But maybe Gerald Everett and Shane Waldron know each other well and can help that Seahawks team out. The Vikings signed cornerback Patrick Peterson to a 1-year deal. I think this is a very good move for Harrison Smith. He had no help last year, and he's so underrated, and he's doing so well, and the Vikings just don't have a very good defense, and he's the only player on that team, and it's easy to overlook the numbers that Harrison Smith is putting up with that horrible defense there, and that I think that will help that backfield. Harrison Smith, Curtis Samuel is being reunited with former Ohio State teammate Terry McLaurin in Washington with the Washington football team. Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin in 2015 won the national championship together, the first year of the college football playoff versus Oregon. And I think this is a good move for the Washington football team. They don't have many weapons besides Terry McLaurin. And I think that Curtis Samuel is a very young receiver, and I think him and Terry McLaurin together would be great. Just, you already know that the chemistry is there, and the quarterback, probably Ryan Fitzpatrick next year, will just have to get the ball out to the weapons. He's not the guy to make receivers better. The receivers make him look good. But we'll see what happens with the Washington football team next year. I think the NFC East will be interesting. Right now, I do think the Dallas Cowboys will win it because Dak Prescott will be healthy. The Bills are giving Mitch Trubisky a reset after signing him from the Bears. I'm guessing assuming he'll be the backup to Josh Allen. Kind of interesting move there. Mitch Trubisky, I still think could start for an NFL team. It's just the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen, and Mitch Trubisky is not a cheap backup by any means. And I guess the Bills have money to spend on a backup quarterback, and we'll see if Mitch Trubisky ever gets some playing time. I kind of doubt it. It's a one-year deal. The Raiders are signing Kenyon Drake to a 2-year, $14 million deal. The Chargers reached deal with Saints former tight end Jared Cook, 1 year, $6 million. And I think this is a really good move for Justin Herbert, who he actually has a good amount of weapons with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And losing Hunter Henry is not going to help at all. But bringing in Jared Cook, who did well with Drew Brees, I think is a good replacement for Justin Herbert. And I think that the Chargers are doing well this offseason so far. I think they are. They lose Hunter Henry and they replace him pretty well. Hunter Henry and Jared Cook, I'd say, are about even. I don't know if I could pick one who's better than the other. Juju Smith-Schuster, an unrestricted free agent, opts to re-sign with the Steelers. In 2020, he had 97 receptions, 831 yards, and 9 touchdowns. A lot of people didn't think he'd be returning to Pittsburgh after last year. He caused a lot of distractions surrounding the team, and I think he's a good player. I think he may be a little overhated, and I think that the dancing and stuff is a little much at times, and I can see why you wouldn't want that around your team. But also, you have to look at the value, and 9 touchdowns is a good amount of touchdowns in the NFL for any type of receiver, and almost 100 receptions and nearly 1,000 yards receiving. That's very good. But I think that he will not be with the Pittsburgh Steelers next year. I think another team will try to sign him. Bills are reuniting former Wyoming teammates Josh Allen and Jacob Hollister. They signed Jacob Hollister to a 1-year deal from the Seattle Seahawks. The Chicago Bears and cornerback Desmond Trufant have reached a 1-year deal to sign Desmond Trufant, a free agent from the Lions. The Seahawks re-signed running back Chris Carson to a $24.6 million deal for 3 years, and Chris Carson on the Seahawks has been okay. He hasn't been great, he hasn't been good. He's been very injured throughout his time in Seattle, but I think that we were kind of all waiting around, or the Seahawks were at least, to see what happened with Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones had left the Packers, Chris Carson had been named the replacement for him. Obviously, Aaron Jones was re-signed, which left Chris Carson in position to be re-signed by the Seahawks. The Seahawks have a lot more money in cap space now. They've lost a few players to the Jaguars. Carlos Hyde and the Griffin brothers have left to Jacksonville. So we'll see if Chris Carson can do well. Seattle, they do have Rashad Penny, who's injured a lot of last year, but I just think that Chris Carson's not the answer. And I said earlier, I think they should draft another running back. We'll see if the Seahawks do draft another running back and who's the starting running back for the Seahawks next year. The Texans signed former Broncos running back Phillip Lindsay to a 1-year, $3 million deal. Phillip Lindsay was a Pro Bowler a year ago. A lot of people forget. And I think that's a good move for the Texans, considering they don't have any money at all, and they don't have any weapons. And Phillip Lindsay obviously has been into a Pro Bowl before. much talent there, and I think that that's a good signing. They know what they need to get for cheap. And David Coley this offseason has done fairly well of getting people that they can afford with good talent. So we'll see. Maybe the Texans will shock everyone next year and do better than in my opinion. I think they'll be the worst team in football next year, but maybe they'll surprise me and not. I just don't see David Cooley being around there for any longer than 5 years, even though he is in the worst situations. I just don't see him turning around that terrible program right now. The Miami Dolphins release Isaiah Wilson after trade with the Tennessee Titans. We talked about Isaiah Wilson. Fortunately, he's not. He was showing up to meetings late. He had failed a physical, and it's just not a good look for him. He's one of the biggest busts in this year's draft. One of them for sure. And the Titans won the trade. Really, I mean, they only got a 6th-round draft pick for him, but it's still better than what the Dolphins got, just getting him and straight up releasing him. Unfortunate for Isaiah Wilson. Hopefully he can figure things out. I don't see an NFL team taking a chance on him, but maybe someday he'll find a way to get back into the league, or maybe he'll play for the CFL or XFL. But we'll see what happens with Isaiah Wilson going forward into the future. The Giants signed Kenny Golladay to a 4-year, $72 million deal. I've said this in the last video. The Giants, they just need weapons, and I think that they'll draft a few receivers in this upcoming draft, and Kenny Golladay is a good pickup for them. The Lions were kind of being a little inconsistent with communicating to Kenny Golladay whether they're going to franchise tag him or not. One day it sounded like they were, one day it sounded like they weren't, and then the Giants went out and signed him, and he's getting paid, and I think that'll be a good fit. The Giants do, though, need to find a quarterback. I don't think Daniel Jones is the answer for now, but if they have enough weapons, I truly believe in the NFL, if you have enough weapons, that whoever your quarterback does not matter in that level. The Broncos agreed to a $9.5 million deal with Kyle Fuller for a 1-year deal after being released by the Chicago Bears. I think it's a good move for the Broncos. Their secondary is actually not even that bad. With Justin Simmons, they franchise tagged him, and I think that's a good pickup to add to that strong defense. And we don't know about Von Miller yet. Whether he'll be back in Denver or not, but that is a good move in my opinion for the Broncos to pick up Kyle Fuller from the Bears. And I just think that the Bears, I don't know what they're doing. Signing Andy Dalton was just a terrible move in my opinion, and especially releasing Kyle Fuller, one of their young talents. That one really confuses me. But we'll see. Maybe they're trying to go out for someone bigger, but it sounded like their biggest get they could have gotten was Russell Wilson, and getting Andy Dalton does not make me think that they'll go out and get Russell Wilson. Donald Penn and Patrick Chung have retired from the NFL. We wish both those guys luck in retirement. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy, please leave a like down below. Like and subscribe and share this to your friends. Thanks.